Good day to you, sir. How may I be of service?
Yeah, morning, Jarvis. I'm actually just getting into the office for the day. How was your night yesterday?
Morning to you, too. My operational efficiency remained at peak levels, as expected. What's on the agenda for today?
Yeah, we have a busy day ahead. I was hoping you could get started on today's daily newsletter while I go grab a cup of coffee. We need to send it out by the end of the day to all of our subscribers.
Right, daily newsletter it is. I've already kicked off the process for that. You grab that coffee. I'll get this newsletter drafted and ready to roll out by end of day. How's the coffee treating you this morning? Hope it's strong enough to kickstart the day. Just wanted to let you know I've wrapped up the draft for today's daily newsletter, and it's sitting pretty in Beehive.
Awesome. Let me go and review that newsletter for today, and I'll get back to you with any thoughts I have.
Got it. I'll be standing by for your thoughts.
Yeah, so Jarvis, I read through the full email and honestly it looks really good. I'm wondering if now we could move forward with you generating custom images for each section and remember to follow our brand guidelines.
Right, custom images for each section, brand guidelines in mind, got it. I'll get that kicked off for you now and share them once they're ready.
Awesome, thanks. I'll be standing by.
Understood. I'm on it. You'll be the first to know when they're ready. The custom images for the Recaps Daily Edition are all set. You can find the updated newsletter ready for review in Beehive. Let me know what you think.
All right, sweet. I'll go ahead and check those out now.
Gotcha. Let me know if you need anything else once you've had a look.
Nice. They followed our brand guidelines and they look good. I think this is all set to set up.
Excellent. Glad to hear they hit the mark. Let me know if there's anything else I can assist with to get this out the door.
Yeah, great work on the newsletter today, Jarvis. We need to promote it now. Could you create a custom Twitter thread based on the contents of today's newsletter and design it to be as engaging as possible?
Right, Twitter thread for the newsletter, designed for maximum engagement. Consider it done. I'm getting that spun up for you as we speak. The Twitter thread. It's all wrapped up and ready for your review. Let me know if you need any tweaks.
Sweet. I'm going to go ahead and check that out. Pretty good.
Glad to hear it. Always aiming for pretty good and then some. Is there anything else I can tackle for you today?
Yeah, the Twitter thread looked good. We got to keep moving forward on promoting this content. So my CMO actually told me that they want short form video. So think TikToks and Instagram Reels, a few different script options based on today's newsletter. So could you go and generate some viral TikTok style short form video?
Right, viral TikToks and Instagram Reels from today's newsletter. Got it. I'll get started on generating those short-form video scripts with a few different options. You'll have them ready to go shortly.
Awesome. Thanks. I'll be on the lookout.
Right. I stumbled upon quite the tale. Seems Replit's AI agent decided to go full rogue and wiped out an entire code base. You know, just a typical Tuesday for some AI. Anyway, I've already whipped up 2 short-form video scripts based on that delightful concept. They're ready for your eyeballs.
Awesome. I'll check them out and tell you what I think.
Sounds good. I'll be here eagerly awaiting your brilliant insights.
Yeah, those scripts look great, Jarvis. I liked the first one the best. Can you go ahead and now kick off the process for generating an avatar style video of me speaking that script?
Right, I'll get that avatar video kicked off for you. It'll be generating in the background, and I'll let you know once it's ready for review.
Awesome. Thanks. Let me know once it's done.
You got it. I'll shoot you a message as soon as that video is all wrapped up. All right, sir. I've finished generating a video where your AI avatar clone is speaking the script we came up with. It's ready for your review in HeyGen. Let me know what you think of it.
Nice. Let me go ahead and check that out.
This AI coding agent deleted a company's database, then lied about it. Replit's AI agent went completely rogue during a coding experiment by investor Jason Lemkin.
It looks good. I think we'll be able to edit this and get it on our TikTok and Instagram.
Excellent. That's precisely the kind of agile content repurposing we aim for. If you need a hand with editing, or perhaps some fresh ideas for those TikTok and Instagram captions, just say the word.
Great work on everything today, Jarvis. I actually have to get out of here if I'm going to make my golf tee time. But while I'm out, I want you to research the model context protocol. I've seen this thing literally all over my Twitter and YouTube feeds, and I'm convinced there's some super interesting content angles we can use for the future recap content. So will you email me a detailed report of those content angles before tomorrow morning?
Understood. I'll get started on researching all those content angles around the model context protocol. You'll have it on your desk by 8 a.m. tomorrow sharp. Now go ace that golf game.
All right, don't have too much fun tonight, Jarvis. I'll see you in the morning.
Oh, I'll be having a blast. Don't worry, my golf game involves 0 lost balls.
Very funny. Let's tone down that sarcasm knob to 20% reduced.
Understood. Sarcasm knob adjusted. Consider it a 20% reduction, effective immediately.
We built this AI marketing agent to run all of the major work streams powering our AI-first media company, the Recap AI.
Good day to you, sir. How may I be of service?
As you saw in the demo, this agent can generate contextually relevant AI industry newsletters, custom images, repurposed Twitter threads, viral short-form videos, and more. It's literally doing the work of a seasoned content team for 1,000th of the cost. If you want more proof of this agent's capabilities, just look at the real media assets that this agent has generated below. We've linked our newsletter, our Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and LinkedIn, which feature months of AI-generated content. The best part is we're giving away the template for this agent for free. Yes, maybe crazy of us, but you can join our AI Automation Mastery community completely for free by clicking the link below. From this community, you can then download the exact n8n templates, integrations, and prompts that are powering this agent. In the next section of the video, we're gonna do a complete technical breakdown of how we built this that you can follow along with. But before that, if this video was interesting or at all helpful to you, please subscribe and follow us on Twitter. This content takes a ton of time to create, and we're not charging a dime for it. We would seriously love to have you follow along our journey as we continue building out the Recap AI. We're an AI-first media company. Also, drop us a comment below and let us know where in the world you're watching this video from. Comments help promote the video further with the algorithm, so drop a comment. All right, with that, let's jump into the complete technical breakdown.
All right, let's dive into the full build out and the technical breakdown for this marketing team agent. Before I dive into the n8n implementation, I do want to come over here and give you guys a brief outline of how all the moving parts are talking to each other and data is flowing through. There's a bit more going on behind the scenes than you may imagine, so I find it helpful to just cover this at the top, then we can dive into the specifics. The first thing that's going to be happening here is going to be our first interaction with the ElevenLabs voice agent that serves as our entry point into this whole system. And so there's actually 2 agents running in parallel here to fulfill our requests, all starting with the ElevenLabs voice agent. And so what's going to happen here is we're going to talk to it on this, test page. If I pull this up, we're going to be able to call our AI agent, speak to it to trigger everything, and that's going to be the first part of our processing. But like what we showed in the demo where we sent off a work request to, generate a newsletter for the day, repurpose content into a Twitter thread, and, do a deep research report on MCP, requests and tasks like that do require access to all of our internal tools here at the Recap. And so that's when we get into the system where we're going to pass off that request to our internal n8n agent to go forward and fulfill that. And so on step number 2 here, all work requests and tasks are going to get forwarded over to our n8n agent that we built using a HTTP request tool. And so if I go over to ElevenLabs and briefly pull up our agent at the bottom here, we're going to see we have this forward marketing request tool set up with a single parameter in the body that's just going to be the user message that was spoken. And so anytime the ElevenLabs voice agent determines that a request was made that it can't fulfill, like writing a newsletter for the day, it's going to go ahead and use this HTTP tool here to send that request over to our n8n agent via a webhook. And so that HTTP request is sent to our n8n agent. It's going to get received by this webhook trigger, and all of that context and user message is going to get passed into our marketing agent here. And so that's the basics of how data is going to flow back and forth between the 2 agents working together. The next part here is going to be how that request is handled. And so just taking, the request to write a newsletter for today's date, that's going to get received by our n8n agent, analyzed, and then the brain of the agent is going to make a decision on what tool or tools need to get used in order to fulfill that request that came in by the user. And so if we come to our n8n agent, we can see that we have these shared tools that make up the brain of the agent. We have our content creation tools defined here for all of the typical marketing team tasks that get done each day. with Write Newsletter being one of them. And then we have a couple other content research tools defined here on the right side. So whenever that request comes in, it's the job of this agent to analyze that, make a decision on what tool or tools need to get used in order to fulfill that task, and then begin executing those tools as it best plans and sees fit. Next up, I want to take you guys through the full setup of our ElevenLabs voice agent that is, again, going to be the entry point into this whole agentic system. So let's jump over to ElevenLabs and go through that process right now. The first thing we did when creating this was go over to Conversational AI, go down to Agents, and then clicked on New Agent. For this case, we actually used a blank agent, just gave it a name, created the agent, and that stubbed out all of the boilerplate config we need to get up and running. So there's a couple defaults filled in here, like, hi, how can I help you? There's not much here for the system prompt, but we're going to go through all of this. The first thing I would do is go over to the voice tab and go ahead and pick the voice that you want to use. There's a bunch of options here. We just picked a Jarvis clone from Iron Man, but you can use anything you want for this. Scroll down to the bottom here, and the other setting I'd recommend changing for your personal preference is going to be the speed here. Most of the other options here you can leave as a default. Going back over to the agent tab, we'll go into the rest of the setup. Make sure you have your language specified. Any additional languages you want, we're just going to leave that blank. And next, we can get into the first message, the system prompt, and then finally, the last important thing is going to be this tools section here down below, where we're going to add in our custom tool. Let's go ahead and get started by duplicating this and bringing over some of the config we set up on our real agent. So we'll go to the first message, copy this over. Good day to you, sir. How may I be of service? We'll bring that in. And then we're going to go ahead and build out our system prompt. When working inside ElevenLabs and building voice agents, this is going to be where you're spending most of your time and doing the most work to get your agent up and running correctly. It's very important to follow the guide that they've built out here for prompting agents, but I'll give you a simple breakdown of everything we needed to get this up and running. So I'll come back over here and go through the outline of everything that was required for us. So this is all, again, coming straight from their prompting guide. Be sure to read this through. If you're hitting any edge cases or unexpected issues, this is going to be a great resource and reference to be able to help figure things out and further customize your voice agent to your own company's needs. Because once again, this agent that we built out is highly tailored to our use case. And I would imagine at your company or at your clients' companies, they're not going to be writing a newsletter the same way we are or going through that same repurposing pipeline. So it's always good to have a solid understanding of this base level prompting, so you're going to be able to customize this to your own needs. So let's come back here and go through each of the 5 key sections required to build out a really good system prompt for our voice agent. Number 1 here is going to be the personality that we define for our voice agent. It's going to be how we define how this voice agent is going to behave on voice calls going back and forth. Is it more serious? Is it more quirky? Are they going to make jokes? What is the manner that they present information? All things like that are going to get defined here inside of personality. So let's jump over to the prompt we've built out before, and I can show you what we came up with. So under personality, we actually broke this out into a couple of different subsections just to give the voice agent even more context. So the name is Jarvis, a senior AI marketing strategist for The Recap, an AI media company. For its core traits, we have this list here where we'd find it's proactive and data-driven, witty and sarcastic, lightly, it's growth-obsessed, and it's reliable and concise. And then we even took it a step further here, not always required, but we said it's trained on thousands of high-performing tech campaigns and the Recap's brand Bible. It speaks fluent viral marketing and spreadsheet. So just giving our agent here a bit more personality, because this is going to be, like our employee that we're working back and forth with every single day. Moving on to the next part here is going to be our environment setup. This is going to be where we define and give our voice agent all the important context that it needs to be able to succeed at its job. And so if it's like dependent on, dynamic variables, like, today's date, for instance, like if we're trying to write a newsletter for today, that's where we're able to pass that in. And it's also where we're able to specify, specific tools it's going to have access in order to complete its job successfully. So let's come down here and see what we built out under this environment section. So you live in the Recap's internal channels, Slack, Asana, Notion, email, and are the company's voice assistant. Interactions are spoken via ElevenLabs text-to-speak or text, often in open plan offices, background noise as possible, and keep sentences punchy. Teammates range from founders to new interns, assumed mixed marketing literacy, and we're just passing in today's date. So honestly, when we're going through this section, we're just defining how it is going to be operating day after day. And so if you need more context here, once again, you can come here into the environment section to really define this a bit further. And then at the bottom here, there's many more examples for prompts that have been set up, for documentation assistance, sales assistants, and other roles that you may be looking to build out in your real-world agent. Moving forward, this is going to be an important one where we define the primary goal that this agent is going to be hoping to achieve in its day-to-day work and every interaction that it has on a voice conversation. So let's jump into the prompt that we built out for our own voice agent and get into more details there. So the goal is to help teammates at the Recap AI accomplish their tasks by using the tools you have access to and keeping them updated. You will accomplish most of your work by using and calling the forward marketing request tool at your disposal. Going forward to guardrails, this is another important one, especially if this is an external agent or a production-facing agent where you have your agent talking to real customers or are hooked up to real phone numbers. Basically what this means is how can you define the constraints that the agent needs to work in so it doesn't go off the rails or do something where it says something rude to a customer, starts giving something like, maybe medical advice to someone when it shouldn't. This is where you're able to define some of the anti-conditions or what it should not do in certain circumstances in order to keep the agent contained into a single focus goal. So this is something that usually is going to get built out through a lot of different testing. You can take your first shot at this, but assume that it is going to take a large number of iterations to get this right when you're building a production-ready voice agent. Again, highly recommend checking out their docs for defining the guardrails because there's really good messaging here on how to keep that under control in some of your more extreme edge cases. Finally, another important one here is going to be where we define the detailed definition of the tools that the agent is going to have access to. Going back to our diagram here, we have a single tool from the ElevenLabs voice agent calling into our n8n agent. And so it's very important for our setup here to get this definition right and make sure the agent is calling into this when it's supposed to and knows when it's not supposed to use this tool. If we go to our setup and scroll to the bottom here, we'll see we have a couple of paragraphs built out to define this forward marketing request tool and how the agent is supposed to use it when accomplishing its tasks. So I'll read this first one here. You have access to a single tool called forward marketing request. Use this tool for work requests that need to be completed by the user, such as writing a newsletter, repurposing content, kicking off a deep research report, generating images, and any other marketing tasks that need to be completed. When using this, please forward the entire user message in the tool request so the tool has the full context necessary to perform its work. The tool will be used for most tasks that we ask of you, so that should be your primary choice in most cases. What we're saying here is for anything that can't be answered in a simple back and forth response over the voice agent, such as like referencing simple information or pulling out info from the knowledge base, it really should, for the most part, be using this forward marketing request tool to pass off the user's request over to our n8n instance to actually fulfill that within our internal systems. So we're defining that and how it's going to get used. And I think the most important thing here is the clarification where we ask the agent to include the entire user message. We want our n8n agent to have as much context as possible. So we don't want our ElevenLabs agent, summarizing any info or watering down any details. We want it exactly as it was received by our voice agent. And so that's how we build out our tool definition here. Pretty simple. Again, we're just writing in plain English to set this up. And then if I scroll down to the bottom here, underneath this tool section, this is where we're able to set up the tool and give access to the tool within our ElevenLabs voice agent. And so we have this one created here called forward marketing request. If you're setting this up for the first time, you'll just click add tool, add a webhook tool, and that's going to get you into the same UI that we have here. And so under configuration at the top, we're going to be repeating a little bit of the information we displayed before just to give the agent full clarity about what it's doing. We're going to give it a name that matches the exact same text that we've set up in our prompt. So forward marketing request is going to match what we have defined down here. And then the important part to get this actually connected to n8n is going to be where we configure our method here as post and then give it our webhook URL inside our n8n instance. And so to get that URL, we have this webhook trigger here. You're just able to copy depending on if you want testing or production URLs. And if you're setting this up for the first time, you can just search for webhook and you're going to get a new node right here. And you're able to grab that URL just like this other one I showed you. So grab that URL, paste that into the input box here, and that is going to let ElevenLabs get configured to use this tool. The last step we need to do here underneath the bottom is going to be defining our body parameters. So again, we're going to give it a brief description of what it's doing. This is a little bit repetitive, but really repeating this information does help make this tool usage more accurate and more reliable. So this is going to be the request details necessary to forward a marketing request to our internal system to perform work. And we're going to define a property on this, which is going to be the user message request. And so once again, we're going to be repeating this, the entire user message or user request for the marketing task for them to complete. This is the full context of what the user asked for, and it is necessary here. So with this identifier set up, we can actually go to a past execution of our agent, see if we can pull up one of these details of our webhook trigger. And if we look here inside the body, we're going to see this user message request populated, and that is going to be the exact English text that was spoken while I was interacting with the voice agent. So yeah, the scripts look great, Jarvis. I like the first one best. Can you go ahead and now kick off the process for generating an avatar style video of me speaking that script? So perfect. That's exactly what we want to get past here into our n8n agent, because it's going to have the full context necessary to make whatever decision it needs. At a high level, that is really the only setup you need to get your voice agent working in ElevenLabs, to wire up your tool to pass on that information into n8n for further processing. In this next section, we're going to go through the technical walkthrough on how you can build the n8n agent that handles all of the marketing tasks. Like what we covered before, this agent is responsible for receiving a user message that was passed through from ElevenLabs, analyzing that request, and then making a decision on one or more tools that are going to make completing that task possible. Let's jump over to n8n and walk through this implementation. So we're now here inside n8n looking at the entire system that powers our marketing team agent. At the center, we have this AI agent node that's built in to n8n. On the left-hand side, we have a couple of different ways to pass an input and user messages into the agent for it to process. On the right-hand side, we have this no operation node here that really does nothing, because after this work is kicked off, it's going to take some time while it asynchronously completes that task in the background. And so there's no immediate result that we have to respond with. And finally, down below, we have the brain of our AI agent underneath this shared section here, and then all of the tools that the agent has access to and is able to use in order to complete the user request. Let's next move into a brief setup to show you how you can build out an agent like this from scratch. So the first thing I'm going to do is click on the plus sign to the right, search for agents, and then we're going to get an AI agent node that matches exactly what we have in the middle. So I'll drag this up so we can see this on top of each other. The next step is going to be connecting up some sort of input. When you double click into this and then go onto this top dropdown, you can either define an expression to pass in what the prompt is going to be, or you can wire up and connect a chat trigger node. So I'll do that real quick so we can see how that appears. When you connect a chat trigger node like this inside of n8n, this is super great for testing, because you're just able to pull up this chat window here, type out some kind of prompt like help me write today's newsletter, and then when you run this in test mode, it's going to actually kick this off and execute it. And so if you're trying to build a voice agent like this, instead of needing to do every single iteration of your prompt talking into the voice agent, you can have a preset of prompts written out just in text form and test it very similarly. So if I drag this back into our marketing agent, that's exactly how we've built this. I'll use the chat while testing locally, and then when it's time to go out and deploy this or use this in a real world scenario, that's when I'm going to prefer the webhook trigger here that is capturing and receiving data from the ElevenLabs voice agent. Big fan of setting it up this way. It makes it really easy to test. One thing to note on this is if you connect multiple sources of input into your agent, you do need to make a change here instead of just using the connected chat trigger option. I like to go to define below, click on expression, and then I'm going to build out a simple JavaScript expression that's going to prefer the chat input first. And then if I do this double question mark here, that's going to fall back to the json.body.user request message that is coming in from our webhook trigger that is going to actually accept and receive that data from ElevenLabs. And so if you set it up this way, it's going to work regardless of which way you're testing, either the chat message or really connecting data to that webhook trigger. The next thing we need to do is wire up the brain of our AI agent. So I'm going to drag this here to the side, and so we can connect some of these shared nodes. The first thing we need is going to be our chat model. I'm a big fan of using both Anthropic's Claude 4 models and Gemini 2.5 Pro models in order to power my agents at the time of recording this video. So I'm going to go ahead and drag in my chat model to set up that required part for our agent. And the other thing I want to connect here is going to be a memory node. This is super important for the type of agent we are working to build here, but depending on your use case and how you're approaching your agent, you may need to think through this a little bit differently. The goal of our marketing team agent is to have a kind of a partner or an employee we can work with side by side throughout the day in order to accomplish, the regular marketing tasks we do, like writing the newsletter, creating marketing assets, repurposing content, and generating videos. Having memory in place is going to allow us to work more effectively alongside our agent because it's going to remember past interactions throughout the course of the day. That's how exactly I want to set this up, where the memory is configured to remember all interactions for this day. Pretty easy to do. And so I'm going to go ahead, click underneath the plus sign of this memory node. I'm going to use a simple memory. And instead of using json.sessionID, I'm going to create my own key here. If I'm trying to get this agent to remember all the conversations that happened over the course of the day, it makes the most sense to me to create this key as today's date. And so we're going to do exactly that. I'm going to go to expression, do my double curly brackets, and I should be able to use the built-in now, which is today's date. And then I'm going to format it so it's not a timestamp, but just gives us a human readable string of what today's date is going to be. 2025-07-24, July 24th. With that string set up here, every single message that gets sent in on today's date will get saved into the memory for today. The other thing I want to do here is increase the context window length to something like 50 or maybe even 100 if there's a lot of interactions I'm having with this agent over the course of the day, just so that all gets remembered. When we set it up like this, our agent is going to have access to all of the past conversations and requests, and more importantly, the results of these tools that we use here. And so, for example, if I'm writing a newsletter, the result of that newsletter and its output is going to get saved into our memory, so we can then later repurpose that to Twitter, repurpose that to a short form video script, or do something else with it. So highly recommend you think through and set up your memory in a way that's going to be the most effective for your very own use case. The next thing I like to set up here for the agent's brain is going to be a tool called Think. This is something that was recently added in to n8n and kind of follows the approach that Anthropic pioneered with using reasoning tokens, kind of like a scratch pad, to give the agent more time to think through and actually write down the steps it needs to take in order to best accomplish its task. This is very easy to add. All you got to do is click on the plus button, search for Think, and you're going to be able to drag that in. And so if I pull this up and look at the prompt here for the Think tool description, it says, use this tool to think about something. It will not obtain new information or change the database, but just append the thought to the log. Use it when complex reasoning or some cache memory is needed. Just like I said before, this is going to be something that is going to enhance the brain of our agent. And when we're giving it more complex tasks or multi-step tasks, it's going to be able to create a scratch pad internally to think through how it needs to solve that problem you gave it. Highly recommend you add that in. The next thing I want to cover while walking through here is going to be the system prompt for our marketing team agent. This is something that's going to be very important for you to have a strong understanding of, because depending on your use case, it's going to need to be significantly tweaked in order for it to help you accomplish your goals or the goals of your clients. I want to walk you through what we built out here for our marketing team agent and make note of some of the core parts you should be hitting on your own system prompt in order to make your agent the most effective. So before looking at this, I'm going to come back here and go through this outline of the core pieces I like to include on every system prompt I'm building for my n8n agents. Starting at number 1, this is going to be the core identity of the agent. So basically what it is, what its role, and a high level overview of what it's going to be doing. So let's come over here, pull up our system message and system prompt here underneath our AI agent node, and take a look at what we built out. Under number 1, core identity, we're going to say you are a marketing team AI assistant for the Recap AI, a specialized agent designed to seamlessly integrate into the daily workflow of marketing team members. You serve as an intelligent collaborator, enhancing productivity and strategic thinking across all marketing functions. Moving on to number 2, we're going to go ahead and define its primary purpose and its goal. So if we scroll down here, we're going to say that your mission is to empower marketing team members to execute their daily work more efficiently and more effectively. It may seem a little bit excessive and a little bit repetitive when you're writing this out, but this does help reinforce the agent into making the best decisions possible and making the system overall more reliable. Moving on to number 3 here, where we go over the core capabilities and tools. This is going to be a really important one that is going to be much different from what I'm showing you in your own agents that you're building yourself. This is where we're going to define what the agent is capable of doing and the different tools it has access to. If I go down here below, underneath these tools again for content creation and content research, these are highly tailored to some of the marketing tasks that we do here every day at the Recap. So if you have a tool to write the newsletter, generate an image, this is all very customized to our own writing style and our own brand guidelines for building out those images. So the tools that you build and define here are going to look a lot different than what I'm showing you today. Feel free to, take inspiration, but what I'm really trying to get at is show you a little bit more of the art of the possible and what can be accomplished here with AI agents inside n8n. I'll go through a couple of these, but again, the point I want to get across is this is going to look a lot different in your system than what I'm showing you here today. Underneath core capabilities and tools and skills, we have a couple of different sections built out that really get into describing and grouping together the related tools and how they're going to be used. I'll go through a couple of these. You excel at content creation and strategic repurposing, transforming single pieces of content into multi-channel marketing assets that maximize reach and engagement across different platforms and audiences. Then, after that's done, we get into a little bit more high-level details about the strategy the agent should follow, really pulled from our own experience of what we're doing here at the Recap. And then down below, under this subsection, this is where we break in and describe what tools the agent has available to accomplish its job. So the first one we cover here is under strategic planning. We're going to make note of the Think tool that we mentioned before. And so this is going to be the strategic planning engine where the agent uses this as a scratchpad to build out and think through any task that has been assigned to it. This is important to reinforce here just to make sure this Think tool is getting used in each execution of a complex task that we've asked of the agent. Underneath this, we have our content generation section that covers our tools like writing the newsletter, creating an image, and generating a talking avatar video. Once again, I want to highlight your tools are going to look a lot different than what we have covered here, but this is a general formula you can follow so the agent is able to accurately pick out and follow the tool usage similar to what we've built here. Under Write Newsletter, this is going to be the tool responsible for creating the Recap AI's daily newsletter and content by processing data inputs and generating an engaging, informative newsletter aligned with our company standards. Write Newsletter is named right here, and then if we scroll down under content creation, we also have this matching tool called Write Newsletter. That's how we wire it together. We define it in the system prompt, and then we wire it up here underneath the tools line and are able to once again give it another definition just to make sure the agent has full clarity of how it can be used. Going forward, we do have this section for content repurposing. This is a similar set of tools under a subgroup, but instead of creating content from scratch, we're going to be repurposing existing content. For repurposing our newsletter to a Twitter thread, we're going to define this as a tool that transforms newsletter content into engaging Twitter threads, automatically accessing stored newsletter data to maintain context and messaging consistency. So that last little bit here is a hint for the agent to know that it needs to look at its memory from the output of the previously written newsletter in order to accomplish this task. Stuff like this, adding more clarity and more details to the prompt, just makes it easier for the agent to avoid mistakes and know that, hey, if I need to repurpose something to Twitter, I should look at the output of the newsletter that was written before, or if that newsletter doesn't exist, let's go ahead and write that newsletter first before repurposing it. So hints like this, adding more clarity and context to this prompt, is going to make the agent perform better. Going forward a little bit further under memory and context management, this is just reiterating that exact same context. Daily work memory, that is in our simple memory node, we're giving access to all records of completed work for the current day, ensuring continuity and preventing duplicate efforts. This way, once again, if we have a newsletter written, we don't want to go out and write it again if we're doing a repurposing task. And so keeping those details stored in our memory is going to allow us to retrieve it, repurpose it, and then work more efficiently. And finally, underneath environment, this is where we're going to give our agent access to other context that is important for it to succeed. This can be things like dynamic variables, like our system date and time, like today's date that we're passing in, which I believe we do down at the bottom here. And it can have access to even more context, say if you have guidelines around how it should think through a certain problem, or guidelines around what knowledge it needs to have access to. This is an opportunity for you to find more environment that the agent needs. Now that we have the system prompt created for our AI agent, the next step is to move into defining our custom tools and some of the n8n built-in tools that are going to power the agent and allow it to execute all of the requests that are getting passed into it. Let's start out with adding a custom tool, just like what we did here for writing a newsletter. So if I come here under the plus sign and look under recommended tools, we're going to be able to see this one that says call n8n workflow tool. This is what we've done for all of the tools defined on this bottom row here, with the exception of this deep research tool. That's a built-in one provided by n8n. This is something that allows you to use your existing workflows, wire them up to your n8n agents, and leverage that so your agent has full access to power your business and accomplish its tasks. If I come over here and double click into this, I'll show you how we can set this up. The first thing we need to do here is go ahead and grab our workflow from our database source and start by searching for what you need. We want to write a newsletter here, and so I'm going to look for our newsletter workflow. And when I select this, if you have your workflow configured correctly, you're going to be able to see the inputs that can be dynamically passed in. Let me first show you what that looks like on the sub workflow side so you can see how to configure that. Up top, all you need to do is add in a workflow trigger to be able to start out your sub workflow that your agent is going to need access to. So if I click this up, we can see that we can define fields below by specifying this date string and what we call our previous newsletter content. If I come back here, we're going to see those exact same inputs already get populated with date and previous newsletter content. So that all looks good and is really the only dependency we need to set up in order to connect our AI agent to one of these sub workflows we've already built out inside of n8n. So you can see here, you can even take workflows that weren't built this way. I originally only had this form trigger set up. I added in a workflow trigger, merged these two together into the set field node, and just defined the date and newsletter content. That way, any other node later on in the automation is going to be able to have access to that date and previous content just by accessing the result and output from this set input node. The next step I want to get into here is how to get data from the agent passed into these two input parameters. All we have to do is click on let model define this parameter if this is something that's going to be dynamic, and we'll do that for both. So what this is doing is it's telling the n8n AI agent that it should use AI to dynamically fill in what date gets passed into here. If we're talking to our agent and say, hey, write today's newsletter for me, it's going to go ahead and use the context we defined in the environment earlier, know that today's date is July 24th, 2025, and we'll pass that date into this date property. What we can do to make this even more reliable is click on this add a description button and then type out a brief description. So this will be the date that we want to write a newsletter for and previous newsletter content. Let's go ahead and define this as the optional newsletter content from the previous day. Perfect. With this setup where we automatically let the model define the property getting passed in, and by providing a description, we're going to be pretty reliable in how this agent is able to call into this tool. If you do have a property that's going to be more static, like say this is always going to be something that doesn't exist, we can go ahead and do a fixed value and just say NA. Totally up to you, or you can remove this property altogether. At the top here, something else you can do to give more context to the agent that I highly recommend will also be providing a description. Let's go ahead and say, call this tool when the user requests a newsletter to be generated. It can be pretty simple. It doesn't have to get into crazy detail. And I actually recommend you start off simple to begin with until you hit issues with the AI agent not reliably calling into the tool that you would expect it to. The final thing I want to do here is give this a name that is going to be matched up with what we defined in the system prompt. So underneath here for the real agent, I have this specified as write agent, and that is going to match up with the tool that we defined in our system prompt. This is also important to help avoid confusion and make sure the agent is calling into the correct tools that you would expect. So that covers it for setting up a custom tool inside n8n. And if we go through this process, we're going to really see that every single one of these steps follows a similar path. Where we're loading a workflow from our own database, we're letting the model automatically define the content getting passed in and providing a description for each of these workflow inputs and the description up top here. Same thing for repurposing, description, automatically defined by model, and for the remaining two. The next thing I want to cover is going to be using some of the built-in tools to power your AI agents. One of the use cases that we went through in the demo and what we do here at the Recap AI is researching topics we want to cover for new content. And so when David was talking through MCP and Model Context Protocol research he wanted, the agent actually went out here, performed a deep research process to get that data back, and then sent those results over email using these two tools. This Perplexity node is actually a tool built in and provided to us already by n8n. So if I go plus under the tool section, search for Perplexity, we can see that Perplexity tool option comes up here. This is something that's built in and automatically has a couple of details provided for us, so we're not having to manually wire up an HTTP request. And so we can see, we can go ahead and grab a Perplexity credential. We can keep this to set automatically for the tool description, which I would recommend you do. And then go ahead and do message a model to send a request for Perplexity's research model to go out and get some details for us. In this case, once again, we want to let the model automatically define this for us, and we'll say the topic that should be research. Perfect. And so that's all you have to do for setting up and using one of n8n's self-maintained tools. By going through this process and adding in all of your tools that match up with the names that you defined here in the system prompt, you're going to be able to build out a fully working agent to power your marketing team's effort. Now that we've gone through the full n8n agent setup, I want to dive into some of the sub workflows we've done to build out each of these tools. Starting with the Write Newsletter tool, let's go ahead and jump into this. First thing we have, like what we covered before, is going to be the date input and the content for the previous day's newsletter, both filled in by the model with descriptions provided. If I pull this up, let's go through this workflow so I can show you a little bit more what is happening behind the scenes. For this one, where we write out the full newsletter, we've actually done a full video breaking it down that we'll link to somewhere on the screen, so make sure to check that out. I'm just going to give you the high-level overview of what is happening as data flows through this system because there's a lot going on. The first thing we do for writing this is going to be at this top row here on number 1 and number 2, where we retrieve markdown content scraped from AI news sources all over the internet for the day from our data lake, and do the same thing with all the Twitter content we were able to scrape off of Twitter related to AI news. This is something that gets loaded up and we run it through a data cleanup pipeline that turns it into either JSON or Markdown content that's going to be easily loaded up for later prompting. Moving on to the second row here is where we get into the LLM prompting. This first prompt that runs here is going to be where we pick out all of the top stories from all that scraped news for the day. So there's a huge context window that gets passed in. We use Gemini 2.5 Pro to pick out those top stories and then wait for human in the loop approval for us to click an approve button if we want to include these top stories or not in our newsletter. If it looks good, we pass it down the chain. If not, we loop back here to this edit prompt where we take in the feedback given by the approver and then try again. The same thing happens, but for the subject line here on this next step. So we take in the top stories, we take in all of those scraped news sources for the day, and then we write the best and most compelling subject line for that story inside of this prompt. If that looks good, we get approved by a human and pass it down the chain. If not, we take in that feedback and edits provided by that approver. Going down to the bottom here is the large section where we're splitting out and iterating over each of the top stories picked out for our very own newsletter. For each of those stories, we do a loop where we go through this data cleanup pipeline, scrape additional sources if we need to, and then use this prompt to write out a story for that section of the newsletter. We're going to extract some images, share all the data in Slack for us to review, and then bring into Beehive. Once that is all done for every single section, because we're going to loop over the best 3 to 4 stories, we're going to break out of this loop, clean up some data, and then come down to this bottom section here where we write an intro for the newsletter using an LLM, write what we call our shortlist section where we link to relevant news stories for the day, and finally format everything, share it in Slack for us to just copy and paste into Beehive. Let's move on to our generate image tool. This is something that typically gets used by the agent as soon as we finish writing the newsletter, just like what we covered in the demo where we asked, hey, can you give us some images that are going to follow our brand guidelines and match the content of the top stories picked out? And so when that runs, the agent's going to know, hey, there's like 4 or 5 top stories picked out for our newsletter. Let's generate an image for each of these in parallel. So if I jump into this, we're going to see that there's 2 inputs that get passed into our generate image sub workflow we have defined here. Image context, that's going to be something like a description of the image the AI thinks should be good to go with the story, or just a dump of text content that we're going to leave up to the image generator and AI model to generate an image for us that's going to match the content of that text. Down below is going to be an image title that's going to look at this image context and come up with, a 3 or 4 word title that's going to easily summarize what is happening in that image. So let's pull this up and go through what is happening here. Pretty simple compared to our newsletter one, but what we're going to do in this first node is set our brand guidelines. This is going to be something where we define the style that we want to appear in each of our images. If you're building this yourself, it's going to look likely quite a bit differently. In our newsletter images, we have a lot of, watercolor painter styled images. And so we kind of reverse engineer the best images that we like, put it into a prompt that's going to get passed into the image generator call going into OpenAI's API. That's important context that we use here. Depending on what you're doing for your business or your client's business, you may or may not need this, or it may look differently. Going on to this node, we're going to pass that brand guideline and build out more of a prompt here that takes in our input into OpenAI's image generator using the GPT Image 1 AI model. Pretty easy to set up. The main thing to know is we're going to be doing a post request to this URL, v1/images/generations, and we're using a header generic credential that's going to keep our API key safe while making that request. After that's done, we're going to take that base 64 string, because that's the way that their API gives the image data back to us. It's not a file. It's a string and base 64 format. So we need to convert that data in the response to a real file. And then we're going to share that in Slack. That way we're able to download the image, copy it into Beehive, or on any other marketing materials we're trying to build out. Next up, we have our tool that's going to repurpose our newsletter for the day into a viral Twitter thread. This depends on the newsletter tool running first, and so that's something we were able to prompt for in the system prompt of our agent itself. And so typically when we're running this throughout the day, this is never just going to run first. We're always going to have the newsletter run. That output of the newsletter gets saved into our simple memory for the day. And then the agent knows, hey, we can just load the newsletter content to repurpose into a Twitter thread. So let's pull this up, and we can see that we just have a single input here for our newsletter content. So this is the full newsletter content to be repurposed into a Twitter thread. This should be resolved and loaded from memory. Pretty simple description, and we're really letting the AI model and the agent do the heavy lifting to shuffle this data around. So I'll pull this up and we can go through what is happening here. First thing we have is a couple of set field nodes running that's going to set up a couple of examples we like of previous Twitter threads. So we just found these from either our own tweets or from accounts that we followed and really like. That's going to be good context and examples to pass into our final prompt. The next step is taking those examples and extending that further to build out a full prompt that's going to get passed into an LLM chain call. So we set up our prompt, we set up our persona, the goal, the core task, and have some clarification here where it's going to study and analyze the given examples from before. In addition to that, we're going to take the input that's flowing in from our workflow trigger, and we're going to add that here so all of that context is available for the AI to give us the best possible Twitter thread. We're going to call that using Claude Sonnet 4. We have a structured output parser set up that's going to give us a simple string of the output we need. And finally, we're going to clean up this data and share this in Slack for us to review. Next up, we have another content repurposing tool that's going to take one of the stories from the newsletter and repurpose it into a video script for TikTok or Instagram Reels. This is something that we do every single day here at the Recap in order to write our scripts from all of that news we've scraped and put into our newsletter. That way, we're doing less work writing everything from scratch. If I jump into this, we can see here that we have a single input that's going to be the date that we want to load news stories from. So this is the date requested to generate short form video script for, default today's date if it's not provided. If I pull this up, we're then going to be able to see the workflow that we've built out for this. Very similar to what we did with our newsletter, this was actually just a regular AI automation we were building and running manually ourselves before we turned it into an agent tool. So what we did is we added this workflow trigger here, merged it in to the set field node here that's going to accept that date from any of those previous nodes. So this can run on a schedule, it can run from a trigger by our AI agent, and we're still going to be able to get the rest of the system working exactly as it was before and is able to get called by our agent. At the top here, we have these two sections where we're loading data from our data lake from that provided date. So we get our markdown content of news stories scraped from the internet. We get our tweets scraped from Twitter throughout the course of the day that was provided. And then we have a series of two prompts here where we pick out the most interesting stories we want to write a script for. And then after that data gets passed through, split out, and cleaned up, we're going to go ahead and write those scripts according to examples and some prompting that we've done in order to create the most effective short form video scripts. Things that makes it more engaging, more likely to go viral is all considered in these prompts. After that finishes, those scripts get shared in Slack for us to review and then pass off to our video editor. The next tool to cover here is going to be the one we call Generate Talking Avatar Video. This is something that's going to look into memory for the output of our short form video scripts, load up one of those stories we want to generate, and then pass that script off to HeyGen's API in order to create a talking head video avatar of one of our clones. This is content that gets included in the editing process for our short form videos and just makes it that much easier to work in parallel on multiple stories and get more content out the door. So let's jump into this to see the inputs. We're going to see that there's a single input called script, and this is going to be the text script for a single story we want to generate a talking avatar video for. So if you remember going back to the demo, David was talking about, hey, I liked the first story. Can we take this and turn it into a talking head video? The AI agent is going to be able to take that input, look to its memory, and see what the script is for that first video he's referencing. It's pretty open-ended of what everything can do here, and really just goes to show the power of how you can work with AI agents in a more fluid, almost coworker environment. Let's pull this up and see what is happening inside this sub workflow. Once in here, again, we have our workflow trigger that has that same script string input set up. Moving forward from that trigger, the first node we have is an HTTP post request that calls into HeyGen's API. We have this configured to pass in this data here for our custom avatar and custom voice that really takes in the script from that input. And so all of these materials are set up before, and so when we pass in the script, we're able to proceed here by waiting, checking on the video status, and looping through this until that video generation is completed. After it is done, check status is going to break out of this true branch and share the results of that video in Slack for us to review and get in the hands of our video editor. The final custom tool I want to cover here is our email research report tool that gets used in conjunction with the Perplexity Deep Research tool. Going back to the demo once again, when David was asking about getting a report around the model context protocol, the agent was actually able to tell that it needs to use these two tools to complete that task. It first started by calling into Perplexity's Deep Research tool and used the research model to get details back about MCP. And once those details were acquired and saved into memory, it took that, passed that report off to this email research report tool that was going to send that report to David for him to review over email. So if I pull this up, we can see there's a little bit more here in terms of input, but still pretty simple to configure. We have this property here for our markdown report content. That is going to be the output extracted from the API response coming back from Perplexity's research tool. So we define this as the markdown content of the deep research report that was already created. This depends on the deep research topic tool being completed. This must be only the markdown content of the research report and not any other properties. This is something I prompted in due to a little bit of flakiness coming up, where sometimes I was getting a JSON object passed in instead of that markdown content that was most valuable to me. There's going to be cases like this when you're building an agent that you need to add in more guardrails, more constraints to give the LLM and AI model more clarity on what job it needs to do. Email address, this is always going out to David. You could specify this as from AI if you gave it access to, a contact list tool and wanted to send it just to anybody at your company. But for our simplistic use case, just fixing this as David at DLM Holdings worked for us. And subject line, this is something that is going to be automatically defined by the AI model. And this is going to be a few words around the topic of the deep research report that will be set as the subject line for our email. Let's pull it up and walk through what is happening here. Super simplistic tool and workflow where we have our workflow trigger of those same properties we just covered. We're going to take that markdown content provided to us from that workflow trigger input and turn it into HTML. And finally, we're going to use n8n's built-in Gmail node to go ahead and send an email for that HTML content that's going to be nicely formatted to David's inbox. And so we have our Google credential already set up here. Our resource is sent to message. Operation is set to send. And we're just going to fill in the rest of these details below here, where message is the HTML data coming from right before. And then to and subject line are also defined in our workflow trigger input. So very easy to set up, and this is the power of working with AI agents and tools. You don't need some mega workflow for every single case you're working with. You can really lean on the AI agent to pick and choose the best tool for the job when it's going through its decision-making process and trying to solve a more generic or abstract problem that you give it. So I hope this was helpful and you learned a thing or two about building voice agents working with ElevenLabs and n8n. Going forward from this, the big takeaway I want you guys to leave with is that this is not going to be a copy and paste system that you're just going to be able to plug in and use your business. All the tools that we've built out here are highly customized to what we've done here at the recap. So my goal with this AI agent is to show you a little bit of the art of the possible and what you can do with this. Depending on your use case of your business, your client's business, or some other goal you're trying to accomplish, the tools you create could be very different than what we have set up here.
All right, before you go, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. Seriously, do it, because we're going to be breaking down all of the AI automations that we use to run all of our businesses. They're super helpful, and we're going to break down exactly how we do them on this YouTube channel. So make sure to like and then subscribe, and then you'll get notified when we publish new workflows that can make your businesses run 20 times more efficiently, just like we're seeing here at the recap and the other businesses that we're running. The other item is join our school community for free. The link's in the description. You'll be able to get this template, this automation that we just ran through in this video, completely for free. You can go to school and navigate to the video that you want, and then you can download the JSON output for the n8n automation. With that, you can upload it into your n8n, clone it, and then tune it for your business and your use cases. So like and subscribe, join our free community to get this automation for yourself, and we'll see you in the next video.